you.
Now
Thank you.
we transition to our panel discussion. To moderate this conversation, I'm pleased to invite Dr. Alok Nikhil, a researcher, innovation ecosystem leader, and one of the key minds behind today's session. He has led multiple ICT ventures in urban cleanliness, water, and sanitization. Established the Innovation Center at IIIT Delhi. He is presently leading the innovation and translation research at IIIT Delhi. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Aditi. Um, so it has been a exciting context setting with the spotlight talks and the cases. With this, I'll invite our panelists. I'd like to invite Dr. Amarjeet Singh. Dr. Amarjeet Singh is co-founder of Zenetics, a pioneering startup which used IoT to optimize energy usage. Academician turned into an entrepreneur. Zenetics was later acquired by Schneider Electric, where he now leads the building energy solutions business. So Dr. Amarjeet Singh will be the first panelist. The second panelist is Mr. Umang Agrawal. Umang Agrawal heads the Grow Indigo, a venture at the intersection of agriculture, sustainability, and carbon management. His work enables farmers to reduce their carbon footprint using AI-powered tools and sustainable practices, while also integrating them with the emerging carbon markets. Welcome, Umang. Our third panelist is Ms. Maya Sherman. We are honored to welcome her. She is an innovation attaché at the Embassy of Israel in India. She is a globally recognized AI policy researcher and a science diplomat working at the intersection of digital ethics, diplomacy, and innovation governance. She brings a truly global view on how sustainability and technology intersect. Welcome, Maya. And the fourth panelist is Nemesisa Ujjain. She represents the venture ecosystem side and currently the vice president at Hunch Ventures and head of the Circle Founders Club. With almost 2 decades of experience in startup acceleration, corporate innovation, and international market access, she has been a bridge between India and the world for scaling sustainability ventures in different territories. Welcome, Nim. Do we have, I see Nemo Maya, Umang, Amarjeet? Umang is here, yeah. Amarjeet?
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Good evening. So, Umang, I'll start with you.
Okay.
Since you're working at the intersection of AI and carbon markets, agriculture is both major carbon emitter and the potential carbon sink. How is Grow Indigo using digital tools to make agriculture more sustainable, and how do you see farmers adapting to these technologies?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks, Alok, for inviting me. Just want to, introduce what we do. Basically, what Grow Indigo does is that we turn smallholder farmlands into high integrity carbon assets. What are carbon assets? Carbon assets are basically, it's a market solution to solve the climate problem, right? So you would have heard of renewable energy, solar, wind, but how does agriculture become the solution? And as you rightly mentioned, agriculture is a big emitter of greenhouse gases, and we don't realize it, but almost 20 to 25% of global emissions come from agriculture. Now, how do you turn this on its side and create climate assets from agriculture? That is where Grow Indigo is working. As of today, we manage almost 1 million hectares of farmland across 8 states in India, and scaling up to 3 million hectares in the next 2 years. Now, where we use digital technologies is in the monitoring and reporting aspects of our program. Firstly, we use satellite data analysis. So you have hundreds of thousands of individual fields that are geofenced and mapped into our program. So we have satellite data analytics that, with crop and practice classifiers, gives us what is happening in that farmland, whether they are practicing sustainable practices or not. And second is, mobile and data capture platform that is used by in-field agents to really ground truth the practices and give us the practices daily. So as a result, what you have is you have a a very scalable climate solution, and almost a 7% increase in farmer incomes, because up to 75% of the carbon credit value goes back to the farmer. Right. So this is basically using digital technologies for the good of the environment and for the good of the farmers.
So that's actually a nice initiative that has been revolutionized this ecosystem from the agriculture to the energy side. So with this, I'll come to Nemesisa. Nemesisa, you have depth across startup ecosystem and accelerators. You have led several startups from different countries in the market access initiatives, mostly sustainable ventures. So from the startup acceleration to cross-border scaling, what patterns have you observed in sustainability-focused ICT startups that are able to break through markets and scale effectively?
Hi, Dr. Alok. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here in this important discussion. Having worked across multiple ecosystems from India to Korea and Southeast Asia and other regions, even including Latin America, in my experience, we have seen the startups who are catering to local problems first, creating a scalable solution, and getting measurable impact. Those are the ones who are able to succeed better even in global markets. I am part of Hunch Ventures, which is a family office, and we have invested in multiple companies, not just startups but also scale ups, and we have done that in India and in other countries, and we have seen that the best case studies that we have today, and we have been venturing into more socially conscious sectors such as agri-tech, such as urban air mobility, even health tech for the masses, that any startup which has created solutions, and wherein the adoption starts with very specific use cases, but it can be useful in different sort of cases, different sort of scenarios. Those are the ones who have augured really well. So yeah, that would be my quick answer. Second point I would like to mention, the problem with sustainability startups we have seen is one of talent, wherein we see that the best AI and engineering talent goes to fintech, consumer apps, or even crypto, but not the best talent today is not going into these sectors. So when we see a startup able to attract good talent, able to keep them and build solutions, they create stronger stories and also become role models for other startups to emulate.
So that gives a lot to think about, because the point which you highlighted in your second point is actually something we all need. And globally, we need those kind of talents to build, and through our academic and non-academic ecosystem, we have to build that out. So with this, I'll go to Maya. So Maya, you operate at the unique intersection of innovation, diplomacy, and AI policy, which is interesting in itself. How can we ensure that sustainable tech innovation, especially in AI, is inclusive, ethical, and globally interoperable?
So much for the question. Again, wonderful to be here and listening to the insight of the wonderful panelists. I would say that this intersection is becoming more interesting because so many has to think a bit more concretely on how to look at technology from the ethical, social lens. And this is something I feel that I would say is a very positive development of innovation as a whole. Because if we thought a few years ago on how startups would think and all of a sudden how government would try to design policies, all of a sudden the fact that we now have to think in an ethical manner on how to make innovation more inclusive, I feel that the space of climate innovation broke space. And that's because of intersectionality as a whole, I guess, from the more theoretical lens. But the fact that we need to think more collectively on technologies because of climate threat, this doesn't mean that it's an easy process. And I think, especially I think in the Indian ecosystem, we're seeing such interesting initiatives to make sure that everyone has a place and a spot when it comes to designing what social innovation could look like. I think one of the best use cases would be languages. One of the best use cases of AI, in my perspective, there are a lot of problems, but one of the good things that you would say about innovation and generally emerging technologies is the fact that today we can use emerging technologies such as AI, etc., to build real-time translation across languages. We are seeing this in India specifically with Bhashini. What's the connection to climate? We're already seeing chatbots that are being deployed across climate settings. One of the best use cases would be with farmers, actually, and that's something that we've been doing with GPI, trying to see how we can increase the scope and reach of farmers to employability using AI. So these are different domains, and still, the fact that we can use the linguistic capabilities of some of the most pioneering emerging technologies in some of the more settings, that help us think much more inclusively. Not all countries require this linguistic complexity, but specifically here we need this, especially when we're thinking on the informal sector. And I think that's an interesting question because I think everyone who has been discussing about it will have to jump between industries. I'm not able now to speak only on climate, like automatically, it's almost imperative for me to address what's happening in the future of work, meaning what's happening in the informal climate sector. How are they supposed to be using technologies now to make it more inclusive? So the question of inclusivity definitely crosses different domains in industry today, because in an era of a lot of climate threats and hyper innovation, we need to think more socially on what role technology can fill in. So languages is one. I would say that there are a lot of very interesting startup skillings programs and initiatives that are also quite relevant, meaning the ability to think more concretely on literacy to innovation and how better certain populations can access it. Because we do understand that today emerging technologies play a very strong role in everything connected to mitigating climate threats, but also generally to people trying to develop their own careers and understanding how they can survive in an era that we might be replaced. So I think these are good use cases, but I will also give a little caveat because, again, you mentioned ethics, and ethics is all about the complexity. We are still in this trial mode of a lot of the technologies, and this is something that's important to be mentioned. So if I'm mentioning intersectionality across climate, innovation, and gender, for instance, we are still seeing the biases behind some of these technologies, meaning technology, of course, has the potential to help us make things much more inclusive using, again, the linguistic capabilities, seeing how we can teach people to use better technologies and then increase the scope of those who are creating climate innovation today. In the same time, you also need to understand that technology sometimes comes at a price. And the price is the fact that we are still not having the most representative data sets all over. And that requires us to think in a more complex manner on how we are designing our data value chains. We need to do differently in the climate ecosystem as a whole. Now, this has to do to different stakeholders, but clearly these are part of the discussions that are being spoken a bit more with the policy circles. How can we design policy schemes and different interventions that will help us make technologies more inclusive, understanding that startups and companies have a very strong role in, first of all, creating this product that enable us to speak at scope and in diverse audience. But we also need to understand that policymakers and regulators help us build this kind of framework that will help us think of technology in an inclusive manner and understanding that we can mitigate some of the threats, some of the implications of such technologies, but this sometimes requires broader governmental lens and perspective to do so?
So I would say that it's actually exciting deliberation wherein you have given a wider lens to observe AI is one of the strongest ICT tool that creates a key area for different verticals. I mean, agriculture is one, climate is other that you highlighted explicitly. But I would say that when we talk about the chat GPT or LLM kind of technologies which are coming forward, so language barriers are no more. When the language barriers are no more, so cross-cultural innovation is something can be promoted very easily. That's actually a very nice deliberation. Thank you so much, Maya. So with this, I'll go to Dr. Amarjeet. So Amarjeet, you transitioned from academia to building a IoT energy startup, scaled it well, and now part of Schneider Electric, leading a very big ecosystem now. So what role did ICT play in your journey? And what were your biggest learnings on achieving the impact at scale when we're talking about sustainability and ICT altogether?
Yeah, thanks, Nikhil. Thanks for having me here as part of the panel. Just a little bit of background. I have been part of IIIT Delhi, where I was doing research in the building energy efficiency space. And as part of that research, have published at ICT Forest as well as other conferences like e-energy and BuildSys as well. So uh, when we started Zenetics, the initial thesis was to work on energy sustainability. Sort of looked at a bunch of and largely focusing on the consumption side. And when we look at consumers, we were initially looking at broad categories of consumers. These were manufacturing plants, large buildings, small and mid-sized buildings, hotels, hospitals, etc. Um, Eventually narrowing it down over the first 2 3 years, we narrowed it down to small and mid-sized buildings, and that's where we felt that there is a large global gap. What I mean is that when it comes to large buildings, at least in the Western context, there are more than 50% of the buildings have some sort of connectivity uh, or automation that's already embedded into the design of the buildings. That's what we typically call as building management systems. But when we come to small and mid-sized buildings, these building management systems are largely non-existent, and because the cost of the BMS doesn't justify the ROI or the return of the investment. Um, and even in Western context, less than 2% of these small mid-sized buildings have any form of automation in place. So that's the kind of opportunity we saw as a global gap. By the way, a lot of research papers already talk about that buildings spend 40% of the global energy footprint, and roughly 20 to 30% of that goes wasted because of different issues, right? It could be, for example, in an air conditioning, we may be running it too hot or too cold, or it could be like some small plug loads running in when they are not required, etc., etc. Right? So 20 to 30% wastage across 40% global consumption. We're talking about roughly 10% of the global energy consumption that's getting wasted. Which, if you monitor very closely, the intent was that IoT connectivity can allow you to get visibility into the operations of these buildings, and once you get the visibility, you can actually impact the overall operations and reduce the consumption. So um, business case wise, it makes perfect sense that yes, you can save energy. That reduced energy will pay for the solution by itself. There is a global gap, as I said, right? Small and mid-sized building, less than 2% of them have any form of automation that's already in place, right? So seems like a perfect place for a sustainability related company to sort of scale up, right? Bring in the innovation and then sort of scale up. Right? But things are not as easy as they sound like. And the challenge here was uh, that we were never a must-have solution, right? So the way now, based on years of running Zenetics and then eventually now joining Schneider, the way I now look at it is that sustainability uh, is not critical or is not must-have, right? When it comes to the actual operations of the end user or the end customer, right? So the operations may still go, they may not be sustainable, they may be guzzling more energy, you may be spending more money, etc. So uh, yes, you may be spending more money, but you still are good to have, you are not must have solution, right? So because you are good to have solution and not must have solution, things become lot more challenging to implement, right? And which is essentially the reason, if we look around globally, right, we will see very few unicorns in the sustainability space, right? We had few success stories from the US companies like Enernoc, etc., that had scaled up, but even those eventually over the years sort of fizzled out, like O Power, Enernoc. These were some of the examples in our domain that had grown up to few $100 million scale, but then eventually sort of got acquired and merged into the some mainstream companies, etc. So I think the biggest learning for me has been um, that the whole economics around sustainability have to work, right? And when I say, and they have to work for mass adoption, right? So when I say economics, take for example EV adoption, right? Now, no matter, I mean, yes, there will always be those 2, 5, 10% early adopters who will adopt EVs for the sake of reducing the pollution, right? But beyond that, if you have to scale it to 50, 70, 80% of the global population, you have to ensure that EVs are cheaper than ICs, right? And then only mass adoption of EVs happen, right? And that's where role of policy also comes into place. That's where the whole ecosystem has to come together, right, for that mass adoption to happen. Um, yeah, so I think those things are happening, but happening slowly. For example, especially Europe is now very, very progressive, right? So in our category segment, like small and mid-sized buildings, there are regulations coming in that are forcing small mid-sized buildings in Europe to have some sort of automation in place by 2026, by 2030, etc., etc. So more of these regulations allow greater adoption, uh, even though the solution was making an economic sense, but sort of a policy push really helped in much wider adoption than without those policy push. So my sense is if the whole ecosystem comes together, uh, the mass adoption uh, can be accelerated. Without that ecosystem coming in together, the economics don't work in a way that we can aspire to achieve adoption beyond the initial 2, 5, 10% early adopters.
So actually, you highlighted, the your experience, and that is actually a mirror for the whole ecosystem when we talk about the sustainability focused ventures. So with this, I'll have a connecting question. In fact, this question is for all the respectable panelists. So what are the, I'll start from you, Dr. Amarji. What are the top 1 to 2 factors that make or break a ICT startup working towards sustainability? Regulations, data access, funding opportunities, or the use cases that we can say, partnerships. What do you think, in your opinion, that will make or break any ICT startup towards sustainability?
Yeah, so I think so when we started efficiency as a domain, we felt we wanted to always do data driven energy efficiency, right? Only to realize that good quality data doesn't exist, and therefore we were forced to become an IoT company first, to get that good quality data at scale, and then only move to using that data for energy efficiency, right? So I think there could be two varieties of sustainability companies, right? One that are dependent on external data, and where the challenges could be different, right? Getting access to good quality data could be the primary challenge for those kind of companies, right? And because more and more people are waking up to the realization that data is the new oil, companies are not willing to share data, right? And there are, of course, privacy regulations and all those things that also come into play, right? So data sharing at scale becomes a critical thing, which effectively sort of forces you to be a second type of a company, which is where you are installing the hardware on your own to collect the data and then create an impact on top of that data. Now, the moment you transform yourself to the second type of a company, you have to realize that you are not a VC investable company, right? Because typically, as a investor, if I have a choice of investing into two companies, one that can scale exponentially overnight and one that can scale profitably slowly, right? I would, as a normal VC investor, I would always invest in category one and not in category, right? So you are competing for capital with companies which are like e-commerce companies that have potential to scale to millions of customers overnight, right? And because they are purely software based. Versus, let's say, even if I get an order of 100,000 or 1 million buildings today, it will take me years to go to these buildings and deploy that hardware, right? So by design, I am not a company that can scale overnight, right? So therefore, what you need is patient capital, right? And therefore, what you need is a separate set of investors to invest into you, who are willing to wait for longer horizons, whose mandates are not just sort of figuring out the next 100x company, right, out of their portfolio, but mandate is to, it's okay to get 10-20x return, but there is an impact that we are creating in the process through the capital that we are deploying, right? So you need a separate category of investors, and you yourself as a founder need to be patient enough to build it over decades. These businesses are created not overnight, but over decades. So you need personal motivation, you need self motivation, you need separate form of patient capital. And those are the things that sort of make or break a company working in ICT for sustainability.
Agreed. So I'll move to Nemesisa with the same question because she comes from an investor background. So Nemesisa, the question is, what are the top 1 to 2 factors that make or break an ICT startup trying to do something in the sustainability ecosystem?
Sure. So I would agree with what Mr. Amarjeet just said, that patient capital is needed and not just green capital, because uh, we have seen that, so far very few exits investors have got in this entire sector. So now if new funds are being made and you approach somebody else, like we are a family office, so we invest on our own, but if you go to a VC or an LP outside, they will ask that, when will I get my exit, whether it will come in 3 years, 5 years, or whatever number of years, and you have to give an answer which is not readily available. Whatever you can do, you can just calculate. So I think scaling a sustainability startup is about the systems context, not just the product features. How, what you are building, are you just building a product, or you are understanding the entire ecosystem, and that includes your regulators, utilities, the legacy systems, not just the end user. So I think and here what plays a key role are the partnerships. You have to build and leverage on strategic partnerships early, and those could be accelerators. Those could be, if you are trying to go global, it could be export platforms, trade missions, not-for-profit organizations, whatever. Do not try to go and sell everything on your own, because those startups who do that, these require a lot of resources, and you are trying to build an entire ecosystem. So if you can create partnerships with larger organizations, even leveraging on large corporates who can be your allies, with whom you can work, and you create these what we call interoperable systems. You are your APIs are ready. It is aligned with what the government already has. For example, if you are building in water technologies, and you are a water monitoring startup, but you have to integrate with what the city uses, which could be smart city dashboards, or other apps that the city has already developed. So these are things which become very important. While one very important aspect of sustainability is building the trust. So what are these trust building signals that you should invest in, and which successful startups have done? Those could be certifications. If you are going within India or outside India, which are the right certificates? ISO is there, or other ESG certifications. And one more thing I would like to add is the impact that you are creating. I think one of the other speakers also mentioned that it's not just ESG, it is also the ROI. When we say ROI, how much, again talking about water startup, how much water are you saving? How much energy are you saving? So these are the things which are very visible, are important. And this impact should be traceable, it should be auditable and very visible. Then only a sustainability startup is able to build and slowly gradually scale to become a successful company.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I'll also request Maya. So, what's her opinion? That the one or two factor that you think can help the startup make or break. I mean, you can share the context from from the Israel and from India both, because you have been mentoring startups from both of these economies.
Sure, thank you. And again, I think very brightly said by my co-panelists. I think that especially in times that impact technologies are becoming the buzzword, ROI matters. Meaning if we have only the focus on impact and we forget the business model behind, then we cannot advance much with the good intentions. And I think that's something important. I mean, it's always important to see how we're able to solve collective problems, but I would say from my perspective that I almost feel a certain stagnation when we are not properly thinking on the business model behind any social innovation. And it's not necessarily intentional. It is just sometimes to be able to commercialize impact technologies, there is a slightly more complex process that needs to go behind, sometimes a bit paradoxical, because sometimes when we want to make something good, such as solving climate, then there is, I would say, more of a social purpose rather than actually trying to see how we can scale up as a company. But this is, I think, a balance that currently the industry is going through, and it's important to raise it up. So even commercial terms, like again, ROI and business models have to be an important part of any impact technology, of any VC we're trying to assess currently how startups can scale up. It's no longer enough just to say we're doing something in responsible AI. No, it has to be slightly more commercial and to show some kind of scalability. And I'm saying this because I would say that currently the market is very saturated. We're seeing an abundance of early stage startups. And I think it's different across countries, and I think that's the importance of such discussions. There are many early stage startups. We're seeing the important role of universities. I feel that currently what is mostly advanced is, first of all, to see how to understand better what's happening on the regulatory side, as complex as it can get. Because today it's no longer silos of startups alone, government alone, and financial institutions alone. each of the players need to understand a bit more what's happening in the ecosystem. And currently, I would say it's a very confusing time for everyone who's been working in, I think, in technology, because regulation has been changing so much. Now, regulation doesn't always meet us, I would say, quite often. But especially in the space of emerging tech, we're constantly seeing new emerging tech regulation coming up, proposals, drafts. These are all the new safeguards and thresholds of how we can moderate innovation. So first of all, understanding what's happening on the regulatory side, even for startup. I think that is key. That brings me to the second tip, which is to connect to different multi-stakeholder initiatives, because today there is a very strong trend of different kinds, of course, for various reasons. It's true for India, it's true also for Israel and for a lot of other ecosystems. We're seeing more and more initiatives, discussion groups, forums that are bringing different stakeholders across the ecosystem to co-design certain products. Now, this is useful because it gives the right glimpse into what startup. And I would say from my perspective, and again, I think there are actually much greater experts on the startup ecosystem in India, such as Nikhil, of course, and Dr. Alok as well. But I would say today that startups should understand a bit more what are the government schemes that exist when it comes to budgets, what grants are available. It's true that there are a lot of private sources for funding, but I think that today, especially across climate technologies and innovation, there are actually so many opportunities that are coming from the public sector for funding. And this is important because I would say we're seeing an inflation of early stage startups across these domains. Not everyone is able to scale because of the competition. The last thing that I would suggest is to see what role universities and research think tanks can play. Again, also for funding, but specifically because we are speaking about a cause that is social, meaning public sector has some incentives to invest. To understand the public sector, it requires some time and also finding the right people to mentor you. So I feel that this kind of cross-stakeholder discussions are becoming key for anyone who's been dealing with innovation. It's good for the ecosystem, less of silos, but it requires startups, and I feel especially early stage founders, to understand a bit more different jargons, which I think is imperative today.
Yeah. So I think I nicely summarized, and I think that asking one or two factors is not a right way to ask, but I'll still go to Umang based on his experience. So Umang, what do you think? Because you have leading Grow Indigo for quite some time now, and you have made it greater than what it was earlier. So one factor that you would think that should be more focused if we have to support sustainability startups, maybe in India, maybe in Ireland, or maybe in any other country, based on your experience.
Right. So, I'll talk about the market mechanism of sustainability, because carbon credit is where we deal, and I think it's an excellent intersection between market and sustainability. It's a market mechanism to solve an environmental problem, and carbon credit is a data product, right? So, the value of a carbon credit, whether you get 10 cents or you get $100, and that's what really the spectrum is, right? You can get 10 cents or you can get $500 for one carbon credit. The value of carbon credit is as good as the data and trust that underlines that carbon credit, because it's a digital product, it's a data product. So therefore, for me, the first thing that comes as a factor is data integrity and trust, and that is where the digital and ICT is really plays a very big role to make measurements trustable, and therefore it seeds the market in a certain way. So that's first, and then of course patient capital is something that everyone said. I won't get much into that.
Nice. So one thing is most important is obviously that data, the trustable data, and secondly the capital and the patients and other factors. But all panelists have shared. So my question to you, Umang, how do you balance scale with sustainability, especially in cost-sensitive or regulated markets? So this question will also be for Amarjit because you guys come from the startup ecosystem directly. So how do you
Yeah.
balance scale with sustainability
Yeah.
when we talk about, yeah.
One is how we've structured our carbon program for agriculture. So we have, hundreds of thousands of fields and farmers that are enrolled in our program. And, if we were to make upfront payments to all these farmers, participants, it would really be non-sustainable for us as a startup. So what we, to begin with, started with was a pay for performance sort of business model. And it really aligns the investor, the project developer like us, and the farmer incentive. So what we tell the farmers is only once the credits are issued and sold is when we will make the payment to you. But at the same time, we will make 75% of that credit sales value will go to the farmers. Right? So farmers are in it, but they are also ready to wait. Many times for more than a couple of years. So that's the first thing, pay for performance rather than upfront payment. Second is, whatever tech we build is quite modular in nature. So it keeps our costs quite low on a per hectare basis. And I mean, these are the two things that I will say uh, really work for us.
Okay. And Dr. Amar, over to you. How do you balance scale with sustainability when we talk about the regulated or cost-sensitive markets? Dr. Amar, can you hear me? I think some network issues. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you
Yeah.
can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think for us, scaling has a few parallel aspects, right? So first aspect is by design. We try to target uh, multi retail chains, right? So let's say a Pizza Hut or a Decathlon, right? So once you prove the benefit at 5 stores, you have hundreds of stores waiting for you, right? Because the customer has tasted the success, the customer knows what it can give them once they deploy the same technology across their stores. What are the benefits they can get? What kind of ROIs they can get in their own context, right? So that's one dimension of our scale, that by design you do a proof of concept at a smaller number of stores, and once that POC is successful, you scale it to hundreds of the locations, different geographic locations. Now with Schneider, not just within India, but globally, right? You start scaling up, right? The second aspect is you do a segment wise thing, right? So once you got, for example, one of the brands in quick service restaurants, right? You can use that same success story to target other quick service restaurants, and then show that what kind of benefits they can get. So that sort of becomes an easy foot in the door for those customers, right? The third aspect is what are the other verticals where it would make ROI sense, right? So essentially, where is it that energy cost is a significant proportion of their bottom line, right? So for example, for retail chains, energy cost is roughly 10 to 20-25% of their bottom line, right? And therefore, a 10% reduction means 2 to 4% of their, uh, impact on the top line. And these companies are anyway running in single digit gross margins, right? So that's a significant impact to their gross margins. Um, Similarly, hospitality is another sector, right? So now we have started getting into verticals like hospitality, where again, if you look at a hotel, uh, the I think a good proportion of perhaps 20 to 40% of your room rent actually is going towards energy cost, right? So that's another place where saving energy would have a significant impact on the eventual top line, right? And not just the bottom line impact, right? So, uh, so scale within a customer, scale across customers within a segment, start scaling across segments where it makes ROI sense, start scaling globally, and then there could be different business model innovations, something that Umang also touched upon. So, for example, in our case, because there is an upfront investment of installing that hardware, and that hardware has several years of uh, life in it, right? So there are some business model innovations you can do. That how do you fund that initial thing? Do you want to take upfront investment for that cost of the hardware, or do you spread it out over the 3 to 5 year contracts, right? And build in the cost of the capital into those 3 5 year contracts, right? So there are sort of different business model innovations that you can then bring in to then lead to faster adoption. So all these things are by design in the enterprise segment, and enterprise deals by nature, because there are like multi-million-dollar deals. When you scale it up to their hundreds or thousands of stores, by design are slow. Then the other aspect of scale is that while you are focusing on these enterprise customers, how do you target that long chain of customers, right? So the mom and pop stores, and actually 40% plus of the retail chain today is unorganized. In fact, in some countries going up to 70 80% as well, right, is unorganized retail, right? So how do you build your networks, right? And that's where partnerships, or being part of a large company like Schneider that has a partner ecosystem that can eventually then go and sell this solution to the mom and pop stores, or to that unorganized large tail of the retail segment, is another way to sort of scale it up beyond the organized enterprise customers that you want to sell. So there are a bunch of these approaches that you sort of target in parallel to eventually reach out to the scale at the global level, and scale not just in terms of revenue, scale in terms of the impact also. So every store you are going in, or every building you are going in, you are effectively saving 10% year on every year, right? So effectively, the longer you stay in a physical building, right, the bigger and the more buildings you have, the more savings you can make.
I think we lost you, Dr. Amarjeet. Okay, so anyway, we got the idea, and the scale cannot be only for the business, but for the impact and the various use cases, which is coming out with the various business innovations. Totally agree with that. So I'll jump to Maya. So Maya, my question is, what are the various policy interventions that could de-risk or accelerate such startups? When I say such startups, it's for the sustainability-based ICT startups.
I would say that, first of all, it's still been tested. I feel that understanding of what interventions can happen, especially in the climate space, that are by the public sector. I think that some different approaches to this. I would say that what I would find is more promising at the moment is everything connected to open source integration in climate space. It's something that, first of all, government is investing a bit more at the moment, understanding that we are almost creating this kind of a circular approach to innovation when using open source. The thing is, we're speaking not about such a, first of all, it's not a classical intervention, because again, it has actually some core technological components, and it's not necessarily just in the climate space or in the AI space. But it's being discussed a bit more, first of all, in India from the DPI perspective, meaning how we can make sure that everyone can access more data sets across different sectors, and especially in the climate space, this is becoming more interesting. We're already seeing some, I would say, especially for my country, there are different initiatives in which we're putting some water-related data sets that are available open source so that different developers can access. Now, it's an interesting intervention, first of all, because it's not just government driven. I mean, we're trying to see how we can interact with different developers. It's more of a philosophy, I think, if someone is speaking about open source as a whole. But the intersection with climate tech startups at the moment is quite interesting. First of all, because it gets a lot of government scrutiny, and these are quite important things at the moment, I think, for any startup. Funding-wise, there are more options. But I think more than anything, it just touches what climate threats are supposed to be able to solve. So if we are able to bring data sets related to climate into the center and make sure that different developers all across the world are able to access them, the discussion is becoming more interesting. I think there are a lot of new options can come into the space. So if you're asking me about potential interventions that are relevant in the climate space, I would say everything connected to open source at the moment. There are the traditional ones that are connected a bit more to the development world when we are speaking on micro livelihood and trying to see how to empower different communities. But what I find to be a bit more useful about the open source interventions is the fact that it has, I would say, a more technological basis in it, and at the same time also quite strong government lobby. I think that puts the entire discussion into a very interesting realm. But hopefully, again, we'll see new and other intervention that has a more technological background rather than, I would say, a more sociocultural one in a way.
I agree. So in fact, I would say such interventions and the dialogues which are happening will definitely help us to evolve or, in fact, support the government ecosystem to build those interventions when we talk about the interventions. I have a question for you, Nemesis. So collaboration is one of the important key. And I mean, when we see we have Umang and Amarjit, different dimensions, but again connected at the core of sustainability and energy and the carbon. So you have been worked a lot with international startups. How do you think that global collaborations are one of the important tool to accelerate such startups or the ecosystems towards sustainability in the ICT?
Sure, that's a great question. I wanted to talk a little bit about an initiative which I've co-founded called Asia Bridge. So, what does Asia Bridge do? It's a coalition of 11 Asian countries, wherein we have created a platform to support startups from our own countries to access resources, markets, mentors, corporate connects, investor connects in various Asian economies. So they could be Korea, Japan, Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, and so on. And how platforms like this support or try to support entrepreneurs is providing a cross-border market access, so you can do real-world pilots. One of the examples I would like to give, we worked with a Korean startup called LabSD. Now, what does LabSD do? They have created these fundus cameras, which could be attached to an upcycled smartphone, and then you take a picture of your eyes, so it's used for retinal examinations, and then AI is used to predict that how many of those people can actually go blind by issues such as glaucoma or macular degeneration. Now, in resource constrained countries like India or even Vietnam, diabetes leads to many complications, and blindness is one of the complications which we see. Now they were able to do this pilot in India, and now they are also working in Vietnam and other countries. So the similar problems could be solved when you provide the right set of opportunities for startups who can then gauge how they can build solutions which are global in nature. Second is, I think, corporate coalitions with real piloting power. So many a times we see that corporates talk to startups, but that does not lead to anything. If the corporate has the opportunity to get a pilot done and possibly deploy it further, that is a great way for startups to take benefit from a partnership like that. I think Maya mentioned about government grants. Actually, there are a lot of grants which are available, not just equity based VC funding, because I think one of the speakers mentioned that no, sustainability startups right now, many of them do not fall under a VC investable model. So, getting people to know what are the different sort of grants and other sources of investments, alternate sources of investments available to them, and that matchmaking, it helps startups a lot. And last thing I would say, and I think I touched upon this in my earlier answer, is that data proof and global visibility. This is very important. There is a saying that do not pitch, provide a proof. So when you provide a proof, then people actually start listening to you. So these are the things I would like to mention.
Again, we need data. And for data, again, how do you validate that collection of data? And there, what Dr. Amarjit mentioned, that for them to get the data, they have to become an IoT startup so that they can actually get the data. In fact, one of our spotlight speakers who has actually built solution to collect data for all the buses, public transport ecosystem in Delhi. Again, the data was something that they have to get the data to make it a proof. So that's really a nice way to highlight that importance of collaboration. And I have seen the lab SDs work that at the extreme rural level with just a mobile phone, they are able to tell the person that what's the health of their eye. And going to that tier 3 and tier 4 rural area is actually a good magic that they have created as a part of this SDG goals. So now I'll have a rapid fire kind of round. I'll just, I want one word or one sentence answers, so that will be a little bit energetic for everyone. So it will be open to all the panelists, whomsoever wants to respond. So one ecosystem intervention you would push for to accelerate ICT sustainability innovation. Any of the panelists?
More policy push.
Policy push. Nice. Okay. Which sector do you feel is currently under-innovated but has higher potential for sustainable ICT disruption? I would want all four to give me the answer.
I think I can say, I mean, agriculture itself is quite, see, majority of agtech funding that has gone, it chases more of the marketplace and supply chain efficiency areas, and critical areas pertaining to sustainability like soil health and carbon monitoring systems have barely received any capital, right? So it's ripe for disruption, is what I will say.
Sitting in Delhi, pollution.
Pollution, right.
Which a lot of it comes from agriculture. I would say.
That's also true. Yeah.
Yeah. Nemesisa?
Yeah, I think e-waste, because we are using more and more devices, and every day this is going to continue, it is going to increase, and I think they are not getting recycled. We are throwing them away as like typical waste, but in collection, grading, and also responsible recycling of electronics, we have to take it very seriously, considering how it will continue to be like one of the major pollutants in our cities.
In fact, I'll tell you a vicious circle, because right now the bad practitioners, they just burn the e-waste, create the pollution, and again, it's going to affect the whole ecosystem and the soil and everything. So nice. I think Maya has left because she is in embassy and there are certain restrictions there. So the third one, if given 10 crore rupees of funding to you to invest in one ICT based sustainability solution, what space or idea would you choose and why? Obviously, don't choose your own area, any other area apart from your own area for the Umang and Amarjit. Yeah.
Yeah, I would go for, I think I think education for sustainability seems like an interesting space where can you create the next generation leaders. So, I mean, I know there are a few companies working out there, but there perhaps is a lot more that can be
Uh,
Right.
Maybe along similar lines, but more focused on what Amarjeet ji said is more focused on buyers, right? Or buyers or payers of the sustainability solution. How do we make some sort of transparency portals for them to really build that trust? Uh, Either with high resolution data sets, more real time data, that they have more trust. So if I'm buying a t-shirt that says it uses less water, it uses uh, you know good practices in the value chain, how do I trust it rather than just seeing the label? So that is what it is.
Yeah. Right. Nemesis.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would say something in the lines of what Mr. Singh said, that talent is a real gap. So maybe if we could set up a global green deep tech fellowship, and it has the elements of talent, community, and long-term ecosystem enablement. That could be something that would be really useful, because even if it's just 50 people, those could lead to 50 or even 100 startups. So I think that is something I would like to invest in.
Totally agree. So, some of the sustainability ventures are there. They may reach out to you for mentorship. And in fact, this whole forum is all about the sensitization, because this ICT for sustainability is a global conference which is happening right now, and some of our attendees are right attending from Ireland, Dublin. So the whole idea is to sensitize this ecosystem, bring more innovations around it, so that we can scale this whole the dialogue which is happening. So, Nemesis, you mentioned about Asia Bridge, wherein you have around 9, 10 Asian countries with you. So, what are the biggest gap you see in the existing support ecosystem for the sustainability ventures? I mean, if the platform that you're building, and we have heard the startups, in fact, the great entrepreneurs, Umang and Amarjeet over here, and as your co-panelist, and you heard from the policy side. So, what do you think are the biggest gap that Asia Bridge, a kind of organizations, should think around building and stabilizing into this ecosystem?
I think I've already partly answered that, what startups need. So the gaps have been identified. So again, just I think I would be summarizing them. What we are trying to do is provide a platform for resources, and resources are not random websites or links that you can get, but actual people who can tell you what is happening, what are the situation on the ground in different countries, experts, mentors. So those kind of connects that Ishabiz is trying to provide. Second is building early partnerships, strategic partnerships, so that you are able to find the right people who have an incentive to partner with you. And it could be very different kinds of incentives. Sometimes it is about creating an impact, sometimes it's about building a mission, sometimes it could be something else, if you are in similar sectors. So market access could be both ways, between say India and Japan, or and vice versa. So that is the second. Third is how to gain trust. Now I said trust signals are very important. So how to gain trust? If you gain trust because somebody is accepting you, somebody is a patron, somebody is inviting you to the right communities and the right network. So that is, and helping you get the right certifications, which is very objective in nature. And fourth thing that we are trying to do is match make the different grants, investment opportunities, angel networks, who can be of utility to these startups when they are trying to get global leverage. And the fifth thing, very very important, is and I think very relevant to this discussion, is the university connect. So which are the universities, which are the academic institutions who are relevant to you. And then we have seen that like recently when I was in Taiwan, that one of the largest tech universities, they want to work with Indian entrepreneurs. In fact, there was another one in semiconductors, and we had shared on our LinkedIn about the program wherein they were inviting, space startups they were inviting. For semiconductors, we are right now talking to. So different sectors. I'm not saying only sustainability, but these are the opportunities we see, and we try to get people to gain access to them.
Great. No, so actually, so I would say that all the panelists, whatever the inputs you all have given, you know, bottles down to those few keywords about the trust, data, regulatory tools, technologies, and one thing which is very important, which we say it's a good to have or a must have, that understanding before starting around it. So with this, I'll open the stage to our audience for any questions. Any questions, audience?
Thank you. I'll ask here in Ireland, any questions? Well, I have about 17 questions, but I'm going to keep it to 2. But first, a comment. I work in a university. My research focus is education for sustainable development. So thank you all very much for liking that idea. It makes me feel very warm. I'm also primarily a sociologist. So I come from a very different perspective. I have a couple of questions, though, just very interested to hear what the panel would say. How can ICT startups, or how can we address the challenges for which there is no obvious ROI for a startup to engage with? Or are we saying that the ICT sustainability startups can only work on those where there is a clearly defined ROI and profit incentive? And are we then assuming that the state will pick up the actions required for the sustainability challenges that fall outside this? And my second question is about values. And every time that we work with sustainability and the complex intersectionality, and I wish Maya was here for this, the complexity of the intersectionality means there will always be contradictions of values. And how do startups deal with that when perhaps they don't have the luxury of being able to take principled stands because they have investors? So 2 rather nasty questions. I apologize in advance.
Wonderful questions.
Maya, I didn't realize you were still here. Very good.
I was
thought you left.
able, you might hear a bit of noise beside me, but yes, I was able to return, so I was able to hear the questions. But of course, Dr. Alok say, of course, who should address for the question. I'll be glad to answer the value ones for sure.
Maybe I can take a shot at both of them, right? So I think we should. I mean, on the first question, my personal view is that we should still think hard on, can there still be an ROI, right? It's a question we should not try to avoid. And my sense is, if we think hard, if we try hard, we can perhaps figure out some ways to get that ROI. But effectively, if there are no such ways, there is of course a non-profit model, right? So there can be those non-profits where you then rely on donors that want to create that impact, and where the ROI is not there, and even the donors are not looking at the ROI aspect, right? On the second aspect, I think you can perhaps be true to both, right? I think it's okay to take a strong stance, even as an entrepreneur, when it comes to choice between.
Amarjit, I think we lost you.
At the wrong moment. It was about to give me the answer.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, I think we lost.
Sorry about the poor connectivity. Yeah. So for the second thing, I think you can try to avoid that paradox. Always take a strong stance and say that, look, first of all, I avoid that situation? Can I still do people, planet, profit, right? All three P's together. But if at all I have to choose one over the other, my conscious call is always at the precedence, right? So if I have to choose one, I would choose the impact above anything else, even as a for-profit entity, right? And my sense is because these are the things that actually play in the long term, right? Effectively would lead to some sort of profits at some point of time, eventually. So taking a hard stance on what's right versus what's wrong is perhaps okay to even as an entrepreneur for running a for-profit entity.
I think if I was to add, and maybe I'll take the values question first, right? And I can give you example, some of the dilemmas that we face, and then we have our internal mantra, right? Our mantra is wherever science is available, wherever science gives the answer, we go with science. If science doesn't give the answer, we go with conscience. So, for example, one of the things that we are working with is reducing water use in rice. Rice uses a lot of water, rice farming, and leads to a lot of methane emission. Now, one of the thing is we move from flooded rice to non-flooded rice, but in non-flooded rice there are problem of weeds that come up, and to control weeds, you have to use some herbicides. So now, and then there might be, if you are a hardcore, environmentalist, you might say, oh, but why are you using herbicides? So there is this one is a trade-off in which you can put value. But then there are other aspects, right? So, for example, vegetarianism. Uh, it's science gives you a very good, very straightaway answer that don't eat meat. It's more sustainable to be vegetarian. But then there are cultures, right? And cultures also have to be taken into consideration. How because if you remove culture, there's so much history to it, right? And food is at the center of so many things. So there's trade-off, there is science, there is conscience, and I think that's where uh, we have to balance all of it.
I'll also be glad to add to the values question, and again to add a bit more to the insight just shared by both panelists. I think that and I love this question because I feel that we are in such a normative conflict between what's supposed to constitute the climate battle as a whole and what role technologies play. And I think this normative conflict that you rightly mentioned is something that it will take us time to decide, first of all, what role we want to play. But I would say, as a foreigner who moved to India 2 years ago, I feel that a lot of the brightness in the ecosystem is the fact that here there is a very strong understanding that climate threats should be handled. And more than anything, that it's not enough just to acknowledge what role the development space has. We also need to see how we are tackling these wicked problems. So what I'm trying to say here that I hope that we as a society will be able to learn how to navigate this value changes, meaning we are requiring now private actors to become more socially driven. And that's not something bad because that means that we can actually make social innovation more commercial. But as you said, we are also losing some of the commercial input that we used to, sorry, the social input that we used to have, because all of a sudden the development sector that used to put society first has to actually pivot a bit. But if we're looking at the long run, I feel that, and that's completely up to discussion, but we need to see how we're making sure that we are able to solve these wicked problems. Either it's climate threat, either it's gender biases, but that we're able to create these business models that are longer term. So I'm not sure if it's compromise on values, and more than anything on who gets to be the one dictating what our values are supposed to be. but being able to scale a bit more business models into the social domains, first of all, will give us this kind of scalability for solutions in this space, meaning more players will get to do better things socially. But I think that it will also, I guess, make us as a society slightly more complex in how we are perceiving innovation as a whole. And it's no longer the bad guys versus the good guys. So this kind of granularity is something that I actually think is interesting. But I feel that also we as an ecosystem, we still need to understand what does it mean that startups and private actors have to take social role right now, and also what does it mean that social actors that used to be on the other side now actually have to think slightly more business in terms of their rationale. And I think that this kind of intersection between both sides, first of all, it's healthy, and it makes us, I think, more complex as creatures, I guess, from the sociological angle. But really like the question, so thank you for this, and I'll be glad to continue this discussion perhaps afterwards.
Thank you very much. If I could just come back very briefly, I'd like to thank you all very much for those responses. I told you it wasn't going to be an easy question or set of questions. I think because I am involved in teaching a new module on junior fresh computer sciences on computer science and sustainable development. And just very quickly, these are the people who will be some of the ICT sustainability social entrepreneurs going forward. But even the barriers I've faced getting such a fundamental course into the curriculum has taken me over 2 years. So I think the focus on education that has come up a couple of times, I think is really important to get that exposure to the future engineers and the future ICT graduates at an early stage, to put it in their mind, I think is really important to kind of like foreshadow the ICT and sustainability startups going forward.
So I have to add two things over here, because we experimented with a course called Social Entrepreneurship, and the idea was to engage our students towards sustainability, wherein the students, once onboarded, they used to identify various solutions happening in a non-sustainable or solving some or other grassroots problems, and they were told to work with those companies or NGOs or organizations and try to build technology around it and measure the impact, whether it is able to deliver a proper impact, a useful impact, I would say. And we have been able to do this course during the summertime. So it was a good course, good initiative, and it helped to propel the sustainable mindset among a couple of our students who later on started their projects and ventures around it. And second, my own experience during my master's, my area was ICT, Communication Technologies for Society, as one of my project, wherein I worked towards identifying a major challenge in healthcare. So in the hilly areas of Himalayas and Lahaul and Spiti Valley, the temperature is so low that if somebody is not well, instead of taking that person to hospital, which take generally 3 to 4 days because of non-availability of roads and bad weather, -40 to -50 degree temperature, and to carry one person to a hospital, it requires 4 person to load him and then walk for 2 to 3 days. This is a story from 2009 and 10. They have to walk for 3 to 4 days, 4 men to carry one person who is not well to take to the local hospital or a helipad, and there's no communication, no surety that doctor will be available or not. So those cases, when we try to develop solutions with the ICT tools, and we simply started using the available tools, setting the basic infrastructure and doing ICT communication channel, video calling, and at least ensure that doctor is there or give the primary medication. So in those cases, our ROI was not just the funds in terms of funds, but more or less that we are able to create an impact to establish it as an ROI. It is an actually important question. Both of the questions were very important that you have asked. With this, I'll ask from the India side, any questions? Maybe we can take one question. Okay. So I think if there is no question, so possibly we can go ahead and stop the event over here. Thank you so much to all the panelists. We have covered the various range of views from the agriculture, policy, technology, and aligning to the various aspects, learning about the various aspects, how the data, the trust is very important. And ICT is not just a tool for sustainability, it's a multiplier. And the collaboration is one of the most important aspects by which we can actually facilitate cross-pollination in various domains with the same set of tools. With this, I would extend my warm greetings and my wishes to all the panelists and all the attendees for making out time to attend this discussion today and hear the spotlight talks of two of the sustainability startups. And thank you to the conference team, the ICT for Sustainability team from the Ireland. And we'll just finish this session from here.
And from Ireland, thank you so much for the work.
Thank you.
Contributions have been absolutely fascinating, and we hope to make the recording available. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.